Hey everyone, I'm just making this video in support of Mark Steele, really, and to highlight a few things and to make a few points. And I'm going to leave a few links underneath this to Mark Steele's videos. I have also made a couple of videos last year about 5G, and it was in relation to trees being chopped down in Sheffield. You know, I started to consider that there might be a method to their madness and realise that yes, it's very likely the trees are being chopped down to make way for 5G antennas, which are just going to be all over the place, serving as, it looks like now, LEDs with this 5G antenna, latest design, on top of these LED lamps, which themselves have now been shown to be a health risk. So anyway, to start with, first of all, I must say, you know, Mark Steele is an expert in this, okay? He is qualified to understand what he's talking about. He is explaining here, he's taken apart one of these 5G gizmos, as I will call it, and I've frozen this particular shot because this is a very important point that Mark makes here. Just look at the thickness of the wires and the cord there. You know, these wires are quite thick, and that's a testament to the kind of power that's going through this. And we're talking microwaves, and we're talking deadly microwaves that will penetrate buildings and penetrate the human body and even penetrate through the womb to the fetus in the womb. You know, these microwaves are causing cancers, depression, all kinds of health issues have been scientifically proven as to be directly related to the general impact of these 5G antennas on the general population. So I think it's 3 years that this experimental rollout has happened in Gateshead, the community where Mark Steele lives, and he started noticing, because he started suffering suddenly from a tinnitus at the ears, you know, like a ringing in the ears, and he started to try and find out where this had suddenly come from. And this is when he came across 5G, and because he is an expert in this field of EMF, microwave frequency technology, he was immediately alarmed and started asking some very serious questions, and has been harassed and persecuted and even prosecuted by the council. But ultimately, the latest court ruling in his favour has cited Mark Steele as an expert, okay? And certainly the council's, Gateshead Council's so-called experts that they continually refer to have never appeared, and we have no names of these experts. So, as Mark explains, this technology is not insured. Lloyd's of London will not insure it, for the same reasons that they won't insure nuclear power, because there are health risks associated with it, and they're not prepared to take that risk. So it seems that the ordinary citizens of Gateshead, the council, are prepared to take that risk. They're prepared to ignore Lloyd's of London's discernments when it comes to councillors supposedly there on behalf of the citizens of Gateshead. Oh no, that's okay. We'll bring it in. We'll have an experiment here, see how it goes in Gateshead. And as Mark Steele has exposed repeatedly through his videos, that yes, death rates have risen in Gateshead. There's been a cluster of so-called rare cancers, even in children, and babies have died. And people have as well been suffering all kinds of other health problems, especially neurological health problems. The incidences of self-harm have been going up, suicides, and yes, there are lots of mitigating factors in all of these things, but nonetheless, there's been a rise in cancers for a start. And also, Mark has noticed that the birds are disappearing, small birds. The small bird population has been devastated. Insects, there's no sign of them. There's no sign of ladybirds. There's no sign of butterflies. And I'm going to leave a link to a film about 5G here, which is a bit longer and a bit more detailed than Mark's videos, which his are quite short, and that's the good thing about them, because he gives so much information in these short bursts, you know, and so he is very easy to watch than sitting down to watch quite a long presentation on the issue. And that film does also go into smart meters. But one piece of scientific evidence that I found very disturbing to watch, I could only watch it once. You know, maybe I'm just a bit too squeamish being vegan, but on one shot in this video link I'll leave below is of aphids and a couple of other insects on a leaf, and they're being, every few moments, they're all jumping, like twitching suddenly, all of them at the same time. And that is the impact of the microwave frequency on insects. And what's so dangerous about these LED lights is obviously they attract insects at night, especially. And so the insects are coming to the LED light, and then they're being fried, literally, by these very powerful microwaves that are being radiated out of these antennas. So Mark has his EMF counter, and he's thoroughly aware of the safe limits and the dangerous limits, and you're talking many times, hundreds of times outside of the safe zones, okay? Hundreds of times outside, if not thousands, outside the safe zones of these EMF microwaves, radiation. Now, I think this is where the thing, and this is one of the reasons why I've made this video, and perhaps Mark will be able to help me as well, because I'm a bit confused in one sense, because a couple of years ago, well actually it went on until last year, I was really pulling the BBC up about a report they'd done about Fukushima, and they were talking about how, you know, 26 millisieverts of radiation a year is actually fine for families to go and live there. But the thing is that they didn't say 26 millisieverts. They actually gave a wrong figure for the Geiger counter reading, okay? So they said it was just an extra couple of millisieverts, and saying, you know, and with a one millisievert extra a year radiation, they said was there, and, you know, and with natural background radiation of 2 millisieverts a year, then there was no health risk whatsoever. So, you know, 1 millisievert a year amounts to 10 chest x-rays, okay? Because a chest x-ray is 0.10% of a millisievert. So, then, thanks to Professor Busby, writing for EU Radiology News, the EU Radiation Council, Eco News or something, his paper was published in, and he heavily criticised the BBC. He gave the true reading for the Geiger counter that was taken and read out by the reporter who was supposedly interviewing a top nuclear expert at Fukushima. and a particular area within Fukushima, and this top nuclear expert was inviting families to come back to live there, you know, saying, look, the place is going to rack and ruin and it's not dangerous at all. So what she said was 1 millisievert a year was actually 26 millisieverts a year. So, you know, I complained to the BBC about this, and they tried to get out of it, saying, well, you know, 26 millisieverts isn't really that serious. So then I put it in the context of, well, all right then, I would like to know, I wrote to the NHS and said, look, would it be okay for a pregnant woman, would the NHS recommend a pregnant woman having 260 chest x-rays in the space of a year? And they were like really shocked and like, no, we don't recommend pregnant women have any chest x-rays. Okay, so a chest x-ray is 0.10 millisieverts. So I then put it to the NHS, these NHS professionals that I was contacting, and said, well, will you please explain that to the BBC, because they've just recommended that families move back to this area of Fukushima that they said only is 1 millisievert extra a year, and that would be 10. That would be 10 chest x-rays for pregnant women. So even with their recommendations, that would be, would you agree to 10 x-rays a year recommendation, chest x-rays to women? And so, you know, they were like, no, of course not. So it's like, well, what about 260? And, you know, it was to-ing and fro-ing and going to the trust and then back to the BBC and blah, 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 round the BBC magic roundabout. Nothing gets done. All they did was take the video down, which had already been broadcast to millions of people. It got took down months later. Millions of people misinformed. And they just put a little note on it saying, yes, we're sorry, but there was some wrong information given in that presentation. And that was it. They didn't say what the wrong information was. They didn't put it right. They didn't say, oh, we said there was only 1 millisievert of radiation a year, but actually there was 26. But that situation with the BBC and Fukushima and putting people at risk exactly correlates with this 5G stuff that Mark Steele is courageously exposing and really doing his best to do something about. And, you know, I do admire that. It is my own approach. You know, I work on the issue, well, a lot of issues, but especially with child rights. And yes, while the public can be informed about this or that, at the end of the day, we do have to address these things legally and to get them professionally recognised as well, because we want action. We want something doing about it. Just moaning about it isn't enough, but we do need to inform people about the severity of the risks that people have been lulled into accepting as normal. Okay? So, let me just get to this here. So this, I think, is another, from what I can gather, another 5G mast. So this, I suddenly noticed one of these in my sister's neighbourhood. She lives in Sheffield, and it's quite a large estate with a combination of council housing, social housing and private housing. Quite a nice sort of area, open, and this is just stood on a hill, and it's really tall. It's a lot taller than the lamppost, and I didn't know what it was. And, you know, as we walked by it, I looked at it, and what came to my mind was 1984. For some reason, I don't know why, because it just looked so ominous. And it struck me, like, where are these things coming from? Who consults us? Like, stuff just suddenly appears in our communities. From who? From where? What do we know about it? It's just there, suddenly. I asked my sister what it... Oh, I don't know. They put it up a few months ago, she said. It's like, what? Because people are so, like I say, lulled and oppressed into just trying to survive in this world. I mean, it's all people can do at the moment just to keep a roof over their heads. So, you know, I'm not blaming people, but we do need to get active, because this is part of the problem, you see. It's when we start addressing these corporations and the kind of control that they are taking over our lives by stealth, and to the extent that they're controlling everything, our homes, our jobs, everything. And even to the extent that we have a government that's just can't wait to scrap our human rights and environmental protection laws and all the charter rights that came with the EU that protects workers, that protect things like the maternity leave and all these kind of things, pensions, the right to retirement, all of them. 317 British MPs successfully voted against, and this was just last week, they successfully voted against a Labour bid that wanted to place special protections on on Brexit, within Brexit, that when we leave the EU, then the people's, our human rights, our EU Charter of Rights, would be protected, you see, so that even when we leave the EU, nonetheless, we're going to stick with all the rights that we agreed to uphold within the EU, like, for example, rights to breaks, rights to holidays, rights to a living wage, rights to the maternity leave, to retire, to sick pay, to work certain working conditions, environmental protection laws, rights of the public to question their councils and authorities and to occupy a fair and equal democratic society. All of these things, rights to justice, rights to be heard legally, all of these things protected within the EU Charter of Human Rights, which corresponds and is, you could say, a 20th century evolution of those rights. So, as time goes on, it isn't just enough to have human rights as defined by the UN. Those rights need further defining. Okay, so, like, for example, with the inclusion of women into the workforce and giving them the rights to maternity leave. So 317 British MPs voted against protecting those rights. And there was 299, mostly on the side of Labour and a few others, that voted to protect them. So, as it is, our rights are not going to be protected. So, and as I've said, rights and laws, they're like a muscle. And if you don't use them, we do grow weak as a body. And eventually, stronger people who get stronger the weaker we get, i.e. the corporate people. Because they're the ones with human rights. They're the ones our government serves and recognise as the people. We, under corporate law, let's face it, maritime law, we're on a ship at sea, we're all stock, and we're actually dead. So we're already dead. So they don't really have to care about this, do they? They're following their maritime law, not the law of the land, the common law, on which apparently our whole legal system is grounded and established. Yet somehow we're living according, we're all at sea. And yes, these corporations have come in, yeah, they own the ship, and now they want to roll out 5G. And yeah, I'm a councillor, and I've been given a lot of nice kickbacks and sweeteners and blah blah blah. And who am I to care what's going to happen in 50 years? And so what if loads of people start dying? I'm just going to look after number one. That is happening. And like I say, when you've got a parliament that will even vote against protecting the citizens of its nation's rights, that's serious. To me, that's treason. So expect anything of them. And please do take what Mark Steele's saying very, very, very seriously. Okay, the guy is not a fearmonger. okay? The fear here is if people just do not stand with him and do not start to take this seriously, and especially if you're a parent. And please look back, say for example asbestosis. Asbestos was in every single school, home, nurseries, you name it. It were in ironing boards, in buildings, everywhere. Suddenly lots of people start developing lung cancer, the most common form of asbestosis, but cancer could go, you know, if it's ingested, cancer of the stomach, cancer of the bowel, if it's on your skin cancer, okay? Not forgetting all the nuclear radiation particles that have been out there as well. And oh, suddenly, what's the major culprit? Smoking. Oh, it's all down to smoking. Now, I'm not saying that tobacco smoking does not cause cancer, okay? But what I am saying is that I don't think that it was smoking that was actually responsible for the major rise, especially in lung cancer, through that period of where lung cancers were just, everybody was getting lung cancer. And it was just at that period, the height of the period of asbestos use. And for decades, you know, they pushed it down, until finally they had to admit that, yes, actually asbestos is dangerous. Yes, we are going to pay compensation to people who worked in the asbestos industry or been exposed to asbestos and they've got asbestos. But the majority of people, it was very easy to say to them, oh, do you smoke cigarettes? Yeah, it's because you smoke. And like I said, I'm not saying that smoking isn't bad for your health, okay? But I do question it. And I started questioning it after I went to hospital in my 20s. And I met a lady there who was having to have her breasts rebuilt. And she told me that all her family had died of cancer in the last few years. And she said, two of her brothers had died of lung cancer, and she'd got breast cancer, and she was the only one that had survived. And she said, and none of us smoke, and hardly drink either, you know. She said to me, I don't believe, she says, if I'd have smoked, they'd have told me that smoking caused my breast cancer. She said they'd have told my brothers, if they smoked, that smoking caused their lung cancer. And, you know, as I say, I was only very young, in my early 20s, but that made me think, you know, because I just unquestioningly thought, yeah, you know, that's it, smoking caused. I just believed, I suppose, that the powers that be and the health officials, they do know what they're talking about and they have our best interests at heart, and hence they put this tax on tobacco and all this type of stuff. So, but I think that we need to abandon this idea now. That just abandon it. Understand that they do not give a toss. And if they're pointing the fingers at one thing, you can guarantee that they're actually trying to distract everybody from something else. You know, so it is a case of strain at the gnat, but just keep on swallowing that camel. Do you know what I mean? That's what they do. So, you know, like people getting cancers from 5G. If they're smoking, oh, it's because you smoked. It's because they smoked. Oh, actually, it's these vapes. Vapes are actually causing cancer. They would rather say these things than accept the reality that they are damaging our health. These corporations with their newfangled inventions that somehow they're just free to dump on us just because they've got a few guys in suits saying blah blah blah. Now they're saying all this is safe, and actually we know it isn't, and Mark Steele certainly knows that it isn't. And so now, you know, coming back to this confusion that I had was about this ionising radiation and non-ionising radiation. Because one of the things that I explained with my BBC presentation and complaint is that, you know, the difference between ionising radiation and non-ionising radiation is the difference between a real gun firing real bullet and a plastic pistol firing plastic pellets. You know, that's the difference, is that ionised radiation will penetrate into the flesh. It will penetrate the body. Whereas non-ionising radiation won't. You know, it isn't going to pass through brick walls, for example. Okay? It isn't powerful enough to cause cellular damage. But and I think this is where people are getting confused, and this is how they pull the wool over people's eyes, because really the radiation that Mark Steele's talking about, this EMF radiation, it isn't the same, and it cannot be compared really to nuclear radiation as ionised, or natural background radiation as non-ionised radiation, because this is microwave. These are actual waves coming from a power source that do penetrate buildings and do penetrate human flesh. And they do impact on creatures and even on trees. They even kill trees. You know, these microwaves, these are actual microwaves. Yes, it's a form of radiation because it's radiating from, it's a heat source and energy, but it is an actually directed beam of power. You know, it isn't something that just randomly is emitted from, say, some nuclear material or a nuclear power plant or a banana in the form of non-ionising radiation. You know, a banana with its natural radiation isn't going to, the radiation from it isn't going to enter your cells. It isn't going to enter into the child in your belly. Okay, this stuff is. And so really it's ionising radiation, because that's the difference between ionising and non-ionising, is that ionising radiation will penetrate the flesh and cause cellular damage. So it is ionising radiation, really. So how they've got away with calling it non-ionising radiation, I don't understand. But maybe Mark Steele can explain that to me. But as far as I understand it, this stuff penetrates the human flesh, therefore it's ionising radiation. And, you know, as I've found in, you know, because I do address a lot of issues, you can have a look through my videos and you'll see. As I've found that in dealing with these issues, that often it's the language, you know, the language. They cast spells with that, spells on consciousness with the language that they use. It's like, for example, you know, the legal definition of a child as a minor human being. You know, that's the spell. That's the spell straight away. Kids are not important. They're insignificant. The kids. Children. Kids. Insignificant, unimportant, minor. Crimes against children, minor concern. Impact of austerity and economic policy on children, a minor concern. The impact of 5G on children, babies in the womb, a minor concern. Do you understand that we live under these word spells, and they use these word spells to control the dialogue and to direct it? And this is what I mean now about whether or not we can really legally class these microwave radiation from 5G. Legally, can they really be classed as non-ionising radiation, when in fact it is a form of ionised radiation, and it's completely different to the kind of stuff that's coming out of a nuclear power plant? So please try and understand that. So before I go, there is just one last thing that I felt was so important here, and it is very, very, very disturbing, because, you know, as Mark exposes here, this Regent Funeral Services that's owned by the council, suddenly been set up by the council, and he said, and you know, Mark's noticed that there has been a major increase in deaths and rare cancers in people of Gateshead since this 5G rollouts happened, and so he's suddenly realised that, and he's written to the council with an FOI thing asking them to show a business plan for their funeral service that suddenly they're providing, that's owned by the council, suddenly plonked in a nearby park, and just yards away, yards away from the crematorium. That's really disturbing, isn't it? I mean, you really are. You're getting into the bloody concentration camp thing, aren't you? Yeah, have the house to bring the dead in, and then have it make sure it's right next to the crematorium. I mean, it is really insidious. And the council have refused to provide their business plan. And it's like, why have they done this? Is this so that dead bodies, people who are homeless, people who are impoverished, haven't got any family, people who can't afford funerals, oh, don't worry, the council will take control of it all. Look, we take the body to this place here, straight from the hospital, goes to the funeral home, straight from the funeral home, few yards walk here into the crematorium. So nobody notices. Because people would notice, wouldn't they? If suddenly there were like 10 times more funeral hearses driving around the roads and streets every single day. People would start to notice, like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of funerals this week. People would notice it. So, I found that really disturbing. And the fact that the council's set up its own little funeral parlour, its own funeral services, and refuses to provide information on a freedom of information request from Mark Steele. So, he's exactly right. These people are acting criminally, and it is up to us. It's up to us to wake up and get active. So to stand by the Mark Steeles of this world instead of scoffing at them and ignoring them. Oh, well, what do I care about it? Blah, blah, blah. Like I say, ignorance is bliss until the moment of the rude awakening. And it's a very rude awakening. And we are having to wake up. It is time to wake up. Like I say, all those years, asbestos, they buried it. They knew it was causing serious health problems, but nobody wanted to pay the costs of it. Nobody wants to take responsibility for it. It's happening again now with this 5G, except we've got people here and now, even before, as it's getting rolled out, explaining to us the severity of it. So we're quite different from the previous generation. Jesus said, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. Well, do you know what? Today, nobody has that excuse. These councillors do not have that excuse. These corporations do not have that excuse. And the people need to get active, because we need to protect the next generation. This stuff, it's affecting fertility. It's impacting babies in the womb. It can cause miscarriages. And all right, it's not doing it to everybody every moment of the day. People aren't dropping, but it's en masse. It's accumulative. It builds up. And there's already enough people being harmed and injured and killed, died because of this in Gateshead, according to Mark Steele's research. And according to the information that this stuff is dangerous from a variety of scientists. Like I say, I'm going to leave you a couple of links. Check through the links, get informed, get educated, inform others, and hats off to Mark Steele. You have my top thanks and respect for standing up for the people of your community, and I sincerely hope that the people of your community get behind you and demand that this evil technology is completely removed, taken down, and there needs to be a proper moratorium on it, and for people to be assured that it's safe. And I'm sorry, no, there comes a time when we just need to turn round and say no. We don't trust you. We don't trust the councils, the corporations. You're all corporate. living according to your corporate law. You're not treating us like human beings. In fact, you're all conspiring to remove our human rights, and already you are ignoring our human rights and trampling on us and treating us like the dead stock that you think that we are. So it's like I say to people, look, you know, maybe it's time for the dead to rise and let these corporations and their corporate lackeys in our councils and government know that actually we are very much alive and kicking. And by the way, we're not at sea, we're on the land. So big love and God bless to everybody.